Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1945. For most families, it was a night filled with warmth, laughter, and celebration. But for one family living in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, it would become the beginning of one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Late that night, the Sodder family home suddenly burst into flames. George and Jenny Sodder desperately tried to save all of their children. Some escaped, but 5 of them never came out. When the fire was finally extinguished, investigators searched through the ashes, expecting to find human remains. Instead, they found nothing. No bodies, no bones, no clear explanation. For nearly 80 years, one haunting question has remained unanswered. Did the 5 Sodder children really die in that fire? Or did someone take them before the flames ever began? George and Jenny Sodder were raising 10 children in the quiet town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. They were known as a hard-working family who had built a comfortable life through years of dedication. George owned a successful trucking business and was respected throughout the community. Family always came first, and Christmas was their favorite time of the year. On Christmas Eve, the house was filled with excitement, laughter, and holiday cheer. The younger children stayed up late, enjoying their new toys, while the older family members slowly prepared for bed. Everything seemed completely normal. No one inside that home could have imagined that before sunrise, their lives would change forever. As midnight passed, the Sodder family slowly began heading to bed. Then, just after 1 o'clock in the morning, the telephone suddenly rang. Jenny answered the call, expecting it to be a family member. Instead, she heard an unfamiliar woman asking for someone she had never heard of. Strange laughter echoed in the background. Assuming it was simply a wrong number, Jenny returned to bed. A few minutes later, she heard a heavy sound coming from the roof. Within minutes, the entire house was on fire. George and Jenny rushed outside with the children they could reach, desperately counting every face in the darkness. Within seconds, they realized something terrifying. 5 of their children were still trapped inside the burning house on the second floor. George immediately ran toward the ladder that he always kept beside the house. It was gone. There was no time to waste. Thinking quickly, he rushed toward one of his heavy trucks, planning to drive it next to the house and climb onto the roof through an upstairs window. He turned the key. Nothing happened. He tried the second truck. Again, nothing. Both vehicles had been working perfectly the day before, yet neither engine would start that night. As the flames spread through the house, every second became more desperate. The fire grew stronger. The smoke became thicker. The family could only stand outside, shouting the children's names while hoping for a miracle, but that miracle never came. Within minutes, the roof collapsed and the house was completely consumed by fire. By sunrise, the fire was finally under control. Investigators carefully searched through the ashes, expecting to recover the remains of the 5 missing children. Instead, they discovered something that made the case even more mysterious. There were no bones, no human remains, no clear evidence that the children had died inside the house. Officials quickly concluded that the intense heat of the fire had completely destroyed the bodies. But George Sodder refused to accept that explanation. He believed that at least some human remains should still have been found. The more he thought about everything that had happened that night, the strange phone call, the missing ladder, the trucks that suddenly refused to start, the more convinced he became that this was never just an ordinary house fire. From that moment on, George believed that his children had not died in the flames. He believed they had been taken. As investigators interviewed witnesses, several strange stories began to emerge. One witness claimed to have seen an unfamiliar man watching the Sodder house in the days before the fire. Another person later reported seeing several children inside a passing vehicle while the house was burning. The witness believed the children looked frightened, but the vehicle quickly disappeared into the darkness. Then investigators uncovered another disturbing detail. The family's telephone line had not simply burned in the fire. Evidence suggested it had been cut before the flames ever started. If that was true, someone may have deliberately prevented the family from calling for help. For George Sodder, all of these events seemed connected. The strange phone call, the missing ladder, the trucks that would not start, the cut telephone line. To him, they were no longer coincidences. They were clues. Years passed, but George and Jenny Sodder never gave up hope. They spent decades searching for answers, following leads, speaking to investigators, and refusing to believe that their children had died in the fire. They even built a large roadside billboard displaying the photographs of their missing children, hoping that someone, somewhere, would recognize them. Then, more than 20 years after the tragedy, an unexpected envelope arrived. Inside was a photograph of a young man. On the back, someone had written a message suggesting that the man was Louis Sodder. When George saw the picture, he became convinced that his son was still alive. But investigators could never confirm where the photograph came from, who sent it, or whether the man in the picture was really Louis. Even today, that photograph remains one of the most mysterious pieces of evidence in the entire case. As the years passed, investigators, journalists, and independent researchers proposed countless theories to explain what happened that Christmas Eve. Some believed the children had been kidnapped before the fire spread through the house. Others argued that the fire had been deliberately started to destroy evidence and prevent anyone from discovering the truth. Still others believed the entire tragedy was simply a terrible accident, followed by years of misunderstandings and unanswered questions. But despite decades of investigation, no theory has ever been supported by enough evidence to solve the case completely. George Sodder never accepted the official explanation. Until the end of his life, he believed that at least some of his children had survived. His family continued searching for answers for decades, but every new lead ended exactly where the mystery had begun. George Sodder never stopped believing that at least some of his children had survived. For the rest of his life, he searched for answers that never came. Every old photograph, every newspaper clipping, every letter, and every possible lead became another piece of a mystery that refused to disappear. Investigators reopened the case more than once, but no new evidence was ever able to provide a definitive answer. Were the children really trapped inside the burning house? Or had someone taken them away before the fire began? Decades have passed since that Christmas Eve in 1945. Yet the disappearance of the 5 Sodder children remains one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in American history. Perhaps the truth was lost forever, or perhaps it is still waiting to be discovered. Nearly 80 years have passed since that tragic Christmas Eve, yet the questions remain exactly the same. Did the 5 Sodder children really die in the fire, or did they survive that night? Despite decades of investigations, witness statements, and countless theories, no one has ever been able to prove what truly happened. For George and Jenny Sodder, hope never disappeared. Until the very end of their lives, they believed that at least some of their children were still alive. Perhaps the official explanation was correct. Perhaps it was not. Without new evidence, the truth may never be known. And that is exactly why the disappearance of the Sodder children remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Thank you for watching. My name is NEXSORIS, exploring the world's greatest mysteries.